It's my pleasure today to introduce Ved Nanda as our speaker. Ved is Evans University professor and Thompson G. Mars Professor of Law at the Denver University. He's taught there since 1965. We are fortunate to have Ved as a fellow Rotarian and a good friend. And I could spend the next 15 minutes listing the many accomplishments and awards of Ved. If you're like me, you'd rather hear Ved speak. Please welcome Ved Nanda to present the Islamic State's onslaught in Iraq and Syria. What is the effective response?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Illustrious Past President. And don't forget it. I'm deeply honored to be with you. What you saw a moment ago is what has brought all of us to Rotary, and that is service above self. And what Rotary Foundation does, and what the committees working for Rotary Foundation do, our own World Community Service, absolutely, it is unequivocally the best deal that you can ever see and do. In so many countries, helping so many people, and without seeking any reward. And that is what we are all about. And that is why I joined the Rotary, and that is why you joined the Rotary. Today I have with me two guests, my wife Catherine Nanda, and she is the one whose dad and my father-in-law, a proud member of this Rotary, Cal Coons. He introduced me to the Rotary, and those who were in the Rotary during that time, in the 60s, 70s, know I started in 79. And then the center that is there, Vedananda Center for International Law, its coordinator, Anne, is here. Anne? So these are the two people. I am going to be talking today about an issue that I don't think that we can ignore. We could not ignore what happened in 9/11. We can't ignore what is happening all around the world. And the so-called Islamic State, whether you call it ISIS, you call it ISIL, you call it Daesh, and I have a little propaganda for you that you probably saw on the table. There is an outline, and on the other side is a map of the area from Baghdad, and as you go toward Syria and Damascus, all that area, Sunni populated area, is at the present time in the control of ISIS. Well, why should we be concerned? We were concerned after 9/11 with Al-Qaeda. This is another incarnation of Al-Qaeda. It was Al-Qaeda in Iraq that became ISIS. And the reason simply was that ISIS wanted to go way beyond what Al-Qaeda did. Al-Qaeda was the one that simply said, we are going to teach the West a lesson, and we are going to hurt the West. Unlike Al-Qaeda, ISIS said, no, that's not all. We want to go a step beyond. We are going to create a caliphate in this part of the world. It will be caliphate in Iraq and Syria, and eventually will take over the whole world in a way. And that would be Sharia in all those countries, and caliphate that ought to be what we seek, and that ought to be what we deserve. And so it started attracting people from all over the world, and religious fervor and extremism and extreme form of Islam, Wahhabism and Salafism, and that is what at the present time ISIS is. How did it get created? As probably many of you know, in Iraq, al-Maliki, who was the prime minister and we had put him in power, he created divisions that already existed, exacerbating them between Shias and Sunnis. And Sunnis were the ones who were totally disenfranchised, and Sharias are the ones whom he wanted to put on a pedestal, and alienated so many of those Sunnis in that Anbar province. You heard last year about Mosul, the second largest city. You heard about Ramadi last month, that ISIS has taken over. And at the present time, the difficulty with all that is that after a year of our air strikes on those ISIS targets, our strategy has not succeeded in what President Obama has said, degrading and defeating and destroying ISIS. So what can be done? What should be done? Because in Syria, you have Assad creating a great deal of chaos, millions of people who are at the present time refugees. There are millions who at the present time are outside their homes and who can't go back to their homes, and they are uprooted. And there are hundreds of thousands dead. In Iraq, alienated Sunnis. You may recall that in 2007, we had the Sunni awakening. The United States had made an effort. There was a surge. But at the same time, what we did was, we tried to win hearts and minds of those people, Sunnis, in that part of the country, Anbar province, the province that presently is taken by ISIS. And it's not simply Iraq, it's not simply Syria, but there are 1,000 people from the West, young people who are attracted each year by ISIS, and they are there working with ISIS at the present time. There are about 150 from the United States. There are probably about 3,500 from the Western countries, West Europe. And the problem simply is that these jihadi Salafists who have become extreme, they are going to come home. And ISIS has been saying, it's not simply in that part of the world, but we are going to have these people go back to their own countries and there start their cells of these extremist views, And they ought to be the ones who have to strike the Western countries. We don't need to send people from the Middle East to do that. And there are presently, according to CIA last year, 35,000 warriors that ISIS has. Our strategy has been airstrikes, build a coalition of countries that might have boots on the ground, help Iraqi forces, train them, train some Syrian rebels, and all of that, as you can see, has so far not succeeded. President Obama has said, no boots on the ground. It was, as you recall, in 2011, when we said all our troops are going to be out of Iraq. And at that time, Maliki had said that we are not going to accept your conditions of having immunity for your own soldiers in this country, and we don't want them. And we came home. Presently, about 3,000 American troops there simply training those people. And you saw that in Mosul, in Ramadi, in many parts of that Anbar province, Iraqi soldiers did not stand up to that onslaught of ISIS. Our armament went into their hands, and they, at the present time, all over that province, they are starting to govern. The question that comes to your mind and my mind is, are they to be able to govern? And I have put in, if you saw that, and I want to simply mention to you, these are the myths that I mentioned to you about ISIS. One, that ISIS is irrational. I think partly that is true. But at the same time, please know that it is an ideology, it's a movement, it has religious fervor, and because of all that, it's different than Al-Qaeda. Second, I said, ISIS is indestructible. There are some who feel it cannot be defeated, it is invincible, but at the present time we have seen that where they are, because of their brutality, because of what they have done, those execution videos, you have seen these women who have been sexual slaves for them. They have slaughtered all the people who don't believe in their extreme Islamism, and all those who are minorities. You saw the Yazidis on the Sinjar mountain that had been there for many months, simply in the sun being baked and not able to get out. And at the present time, even in those cities and states where they are in the Anbar province, they have been brutal. But they have started governing. And I would simply say that they are not indestructible, because there are many more like them in the past also who started with that kind of fervor and could not govern because they were terrorists, and they were good terrorists. But now they are governing, and they are bad governors. And the amazing part about them is that at the present time, everybody hates them. It's not simply the West. Even Muslims, Sharias obviously hate them. But even Sunnis, who have been alienated because of chaos, because of corruption, because of all those ills that have been part of Iraq and Syria, that even those Sunnis don't like them. But at the same time, I have said the third one, that the US can destroy ISIS, and that is a myth. We can't do it alone. We do need to have, in that part, Sunni part, at least partners with us. And if nothing else, those Sunnis have to stand up to them, and maybe they can't take a very strong stand, but they must not support them. And if we could do it in the past with that Sunni awakening, there is no reason that we cannot do it again. And finally, I said, ISIS will collapse under its own weight. That is true. Everybody dislikes them. But at the same time, we do need to remember history. And history has shown us that in the past also, many of these very brutal regimes, they still become revolutionary regimes. Bolsheviks, the Soviet Union, China under communists, you have examples, even the French Revolution. What happened after that? And all that brutality continued for a period of time, and there were those who said they are going to die, they are going to collapse, they are going to not able to thrive because of their own weight, they'll collapse. And it didn't happen. So I think all these things bring to our mind that ISIS is a big threat, not simply to that region. We have interest in that region. We want stability in the Middle East. But more than that, we do want to see that values that the United States has always espoused. You remember Marshall Plan, help to Europe to stand on its own feet. You remember that from the very beginning, we have talked about democracy, human rights, rule of law, human dignity, and those are the values that we don't want, under any circumstances, to be simply destroyed because of what ISIS wants to do in that region, and what ISIS would like to do, its own followers in the Western countries to hit at the Western interests. So I think at this stage, what should we be doing? I'm going to stop very quickly. I wanted to just talk about it in bullet points. 3 things I have mentioned here. One is that we need to see that again. Now it's Abadi. He is the prime minister who has said that he is going to bridge all those differences between Sunnis and Shiites. But the trouble simply is that Iran has sent those Shiite militias, and you probably have heard and read about them, that many of them, their signature part was simply to see that if there are Sunnis, drill their heads, kill them by torturing them. And at the present time, Sunnis do not have a great deal of faith in the Shiite regime out of Afghanistan, out of Baghdad. Kurds, Peshmerga, they are the only ones who at the present time are fighters that have got heart, fighters that have got resolute minds, fighters who are at the present time making sure that ISIS does not move into their parts. So the first thing is to see that Sunnis in that Anbar province are on board. Second is that we do need at the present time more United States assistance, not simply by airstrikes, not simply by 3,000 people. I don't have the time to go into all the details, and I am aware of the fact we in this country are tired of wars. Afghanistan, Iraq, it has given us a pause, both of these wars. We don't want any more war in that part of the world. But at the same time, we need more American soldiers in that part, not maybe in a combatant fashion, but 3,000 are not going to suffice. And the third part is that we need at the present time to change our strategy and to make sure that from Egypt to Jordan to many of these countries, even Saudi Arabia and others, that they are not on board simply to say that they are on board, but they are on board with their troops there, with fighting ISIS. And my simple statement is that the United States, with its lead, with its own values, values that we cherish, we cannot permit ISIS to win. And my own feeling is ISIS will be defeated, we will be the lead, and the United States, you and I, will be proud that we have done that. Thank you very much.
Club,
Thank
Club
you.
31, we have time for a few questions.
Well,
Just a
thank
few-
you very much. I'm happy to share my thoughts with you, and you always have been so very, very kind to me. I'm happy to answer a couple questions.
Thank you so much. I recently saw an article by Fordham Law which analyzed cases in the United States where people, about 60 or so U.S. citizens in particular, had been convicted of conspiring with ISIS. And it seems like ISIS's intent is not only to establish the caliphate, like you mentioned, but they're also advocating particular individuals to conduct lone man attacks against law enforcement, military, and others, like we see with Chattanooga. And I was wondering if you could comment on that and what potential steps we might take to address it.
I'm sorry, I did not quite get the question. The question is?
I was wondering if you could comment on ISIS's goal to utilize individuals here in the United States to conduct terrorist attacks against law enforcement and military personnel like Chattanooga, and what steps, if any, we can take to
Thank you
address
very much. I think at the present time, the United States and the West have not succeeded in this propaganda war. I think ISIS has been very, very successful in social media. And the need at the present time is that we also ideologically and in terms of our own message able to convey to people that ISIS is not the answer. At the present time, what has happened is, you're absolutely right, not only in the West, but now in Libya, in Yemen, in many other countries, they are asking those countries to be the provinces of ISIS. And in the West, they are asking, you're absolutely right, that these people who are following ISIS, that they ought to kill, especially law enforcement officials. So I think we need more intelligence. Intelligence is being strengthened by the United States. We need many centralized efforts to be made. At the present time, the United States has so many departments and so many agencies that each one of it has its own special way of dealing with it. Why we need to have centralized, we need to have specialized efforts made in that direction.
Thank you very much. I think that there are a number of people in this room that would agree with you, that stand with what you say. Yet it seems like in Washington, there's an inherent frustration in that it seems like we know that this is necessary, but it doesn't seem anything is going in that direction. What's your response to that?
My response is that Washington, unfortunately, has been dysfunctional for many years now. And I think at the present time, Washington cannot move until the civil society in this country compels our own decision makers to be at the present time rational, look at problems, set priorities, and take action. And I think that is where leaders in this room who have got a say with the decision makers need to put pressure upon them. And in our own schools, in our own churches, in our all civil society organizations, we need to make sure that we compel the government to take the right action and to be functional in Washington and not be dysfunctional as they have been all along.
Thank you, Professor Nanda. And I have a question. There was a documentary you may have seen or heard of on, I believe, CNN, involving a German journalist who went into ISIS, was practically invited by them. But one theme he brought back was that people of ISIS say, yes, they do want American boots on the ground coming after them, as in they would like to kill as many Americans as possible. So I just wondered about your reaction to that.
I'm not asking that we send 150,000 as we did earlier. That's not what I'm saying. And I totally agree with American boots not there to be on the ground, because we are not trusted by people in that part of the world anyway. And after Iraq and Afghanistan, there is not that kind of clout that we need in order to be able to do the right thing. But at the same time, I think not 150,000, but not simply 3,000. We need more soldiers to be able to train those people and to see that Iraqis at the present time have Shia-Sunni divide come to an end. That is the only way that we can succeed. I'm so sorry that we didn't have the time to go into it, but I'm here and I'm at your command anytime. And those of you who want to come to the law school. People come to law even after third and fourth careers, and many of you are in that stage. Thank you.